Why was she the only one moving? The briefing room had gone silent. Orders hadn't come, not from the captain, not from the radio. Men and women sat frozen in their chairs, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. But waiting wasn't something she was good at. Her hand hovered over the edge of the map table, tracing the route again. Dust from the desert still clung to her uniform, making faint white streaks against the olive drab. The air smelled of sweat and old coffee, of fear that no one wanted to admit. Outside, the distant pop of gunfire echoed like a reminder. The world wasn't stopping for them. She glanced at the lieutenant. His face was pale, jaw clenched. He was waiting too. For what she didn't know, reinforcements, an order that wouldn't come. She swallowed, her throat dry. We don't have time for this. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but sharp. We move now. Heads turned, a few raised brows, the room stayed silent. No one contradicted her, no one followed her either. So she stood, pulled her rifle strap over her shoulder, and walked out first. The air outside was thick with heat. The base sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dry hills and dust that clung to every surface. The sky was too bright, washing the world in harsh white. Her boots crunched against gravel as she passed the outer gate. No one stopped her. No one asked why she was leaving. She could still hear the briefing room behind her, the quiet, the hesitation like a weight trying to pull her back. But something in her chest wouldn't let her stop. If I don't move, no one will. Down the hill, a small group of soldiers waited by the vehicles. 2 Humvees sat with their engines off, heat shimmering around their hoods. Private Hall looked up when he saw her. We got the go-ahead. She shook her head. No orders were going anyway. He hesitated, eyes darting to the others. That's not. Then stay, she cut him off, softer than she meant to. Hall swallowed hard, then grabbed his helmet. I didn't say I wasn't coming. One by one, the others climbed in. Not because they had to, but because someone had to start. The engine roared to life. The smell of diesel filled the air, hot and sharp. She slid into the passenger seat, her rifle across her lap. Her heart was beating too fast. What am I doing? It wasn't fear of the enemy. Not exactly. It was fear of being wrong, of taking them somewhere they might not come back from. She thought of the last time she waited. Weeks ago, the outpost had been hit, communications down. They waited for orders then too, and by the time command finally cleared them to move, it was too late. They'd found the bodies. She still remembered the smell. No, she couldn't let that happen again. The road was narrow, rough. Dust curled around the wheels as they drove toward the hills. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, searching for movement, anything out of place. The radio crackled once, then went silent again. Still nothing, she asked. Hall shook his head, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. They'll notice we left soon. Good. He shot her a look. She didn't explain. The closer they got, the quieter the world felt. Not silent, just wrong. Birds had gone, no wind, even the air seemed to hold its breath. She motioned for the convoy to slow. Her boots hit the ground before the Humvee had fully stopped. The earth was hot, almost soft under her knees as she crouched, peering through the scope. There on the ridge, a faint reflection, glass catching the sun. Her breath caught. She raised a fist, the convoy halted behind her. For a moment, all she could hear was her own breathing inside the helmet. Her finger hovered near the trigger. If I shoot, this starts something we can't undo. But if she didn't, if she waited, that glint could mean death. Her heart thudded. She steadied her breath. And squeezed. The shot cracked through the still air. Then came the chaos. Voices shouting, foreign words carried by the wind, footsteps scattering, a muzzle flash from the ridge. She hit the ground, rolled behind a rock. The dirt tasted like copper in her mouth. "Contact 3 o'clock," Hall shouted. Bullets tore into the dirt near her boots. Adrenaline surged hot in her veins. She fired again. The figure on the ridge fell back motionless. The rest of her team opened up short, controlled bursts. Dust clouded the air, turning everything into a blur of light and sound. When it was over, the ridge was silent again. But this silence felt different. Hall climbed out of the Humvee, breathing hard. "You just started a fight." She stood slowly, her knees aching. "No, I just ended an ambush." His mouth opened, then shut again. No one argued. They moved forward carefully, clearing the ridge. They found the bodies, the rifles, the maps. Hall let out a low whistle. They were setting up to hit the convoy, ours. She didn't respond, just knelt, staring at the dirt where the first body lay. Her hands were steady now. For the first time since the briefing room, her chest didn't feel so tight. Back at the vehicles, Hall gave her a look. "You knew, didn't you, that something was coming?" She shook her head. "No." He frowned. "I just couldn't sit there and do nothing," she said quietly. Hall didn't answer. The convoy rolled out again. This time, no one asked if they were supposed to. That night back at the base, the lieutenant was waiting. He didn't shout, didn't even look angry. "Report," he said simply. She told him every detail. He nodded once, slowly. Then he said something she didn't expect. "You saved them." She stared at him, unsure what to say. He didn't elaborate, just turned and left. But the words stayed with her long after. Lying on her bunk, she stared at the ceiling. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop. She saw the glint on the ridge again, the faces of her team, the moment before she pulled the trigger. She hadn't waited for orders. And maybe, just maybe, that's why they were all still alive. But tomorrow would bring new choices. And no one would tell her what to do then, either. Why couldn't she sleep? The base was quiet now. Generators hummed somewhere in the dark, a low, steady drone. The air smelled of dust and diesel, the kind of smell that clings to skin no matter how hard you scrub. She lay on her bunk, boots still on, one arm over her eyes. The lieutenant's words echoed in her head. "You saved them." She should have felt proud. Instead, she just felt hollow. Because there was something she hadn't told him. Something that had been eating at her since that night at Outpost 6. The sound of the door opening pulled her back to the present. Hall stepped in, helmet under one arm. His face was still streaked with dirt. "You awake?" She didn't move her arm. "You just saw me move." He huffed, almost a laugh. "Fair." He sat on the edge of the bunk opposite hers. "They're talking about it in the mess hall," he said. She turned her head. "What?" Us, going out without orders." Her chest tightened, and Hall shrugged. "Half think you're crazy, half think you've got more guts than the rest of command combined." She snorted softly. "That's not a compliment." "Maybe not, but it means they're watching now." The room went quiet again. Hall studied her face. "You ever think about why you do it?" he asked. She hesitated. Because she had. And she hated the answer. 6 months ago. She could still see it if she closed her eyes, the desert night, too still. Her squad had been stationed at Outpost 6. It was supposed to be a low-risk assignment, a routine watch. Until the radio went dead. They waited for orders, waited for permission to act. Hours passed. By the time reinforcements came, the attack was already over. She'd been one of the first on the scene. She remembered stepping through the blown-open door, the floor wet with dust and blood, and seeing her sister, Private First Class Myra Lane, younger by 2 years, smiling in every photo she had. Her body was among the others. Her dog tags were still warm when she pulled them free. No one ever said it out loud, but everyone knew. If they'd moved sooner, they might have saved them. Might have saved her. She blinked, forcing the memory back down. Hall was still watching her. "I don't wait anymore," she said finally. He nodded once, slowly, and didn't ask anything else. The next morning, the orders came. Not about yesterday. Those were handled, filed away as a successful engagement. No, these orders were worse. A recon team had gone dark 10 clicks north. No comms for 18 hours. She felt the same cold weight settle in her chest. Hall was already at her side. "You know what they'll say, wait until morning. Wait until we get drone coverage. Then they'll find bodies by morning." He didn't argue. By sunset, she had a team assembled. Not because she was in charge, she wasn't, but because no one else had moved yet. The lieutenant didn't stop her this time. He just met her eyes, something unspoken passing between them. "Bring them back," he said quietly. She nodded once. They rolled out under cover of darkness. The desert night was cold, the stars sharp and endless overhead. She felt every bump of the road through the seat. Her rifle lay across her lap again, her hands resting on it like an anchor. This time, no one questioned the decision to go. Even the rookies stayed quiet. The silence was its own language. We all know what this means. Halfway there, they ditched the vehicles and moved on foot. The moon was bright, painting the hills silver. Her boots sank softly into the sand. Every sound seemed too loud, the click of a rifle sling, the crunch of gravel. She raised a fist and the team froze. In the distance, a faint orange glow flickered against the horizon. Fire! Her stomach turned. They moved faster. When they crested the last hill, the sight stopped them cold. The recon team's outpost was a blackened shell. Smoke rose in thin streams. The smell hit next: burned wood, burned metal, burned something else. Her throat closed. She motioned the team forward, her own hands steady even though her heart was hammering. Inside the perimeter, the ground was littered with casings and shattered gear. No bodies. Which was worse? "Tracks," Hall whispered. He was crouched near the edge, studying the sand. "Dragged more than one." Her breath caught. "They're alive," she said. It wasn't a question. Hall nodded grimly. But for how long? That was the real question. They followed the tracks for hours, every step pushing them deeper into hostile territory. The night wind picked up, cold against her sweat. Once far ahead, a dog barked. Then voices. She dropped to one knee, heart pounding. Through the night scope, she saw them. A cluster of enemy fighters around a fire, rifles slung carelessly. And beyond them, tied to a post, 3 figures. Alive. But barely. Her mind raced. They didn't have the numbers for a firefight. And waiting for backup meant leaving the captives here until morning, if they lasted that long. She could hear her sister's name in her head. Myra. She turned to Hall. His face was pale in the moonlight. "You're not seriously thinking." "I am." He swore under his breath. "You're going to get us killed." "Maybe." She met his eyes. "But not them." She split the team, whispering instructions. 2 to flank, 1 to cover. Every second felt like it stretched too long. Then she moved. A shadow in the night. Her heart hammered so loud she swore they'd hear it. She waited until one fighter stood and wandered toward the fire. Then she acted. Quick, silent, precise. The man dropped before he could shout. Chaos erupted. Her team opened up from the flank, short bursts, just enough to confuse and scatter them. Hall was already cutting the first prisoner loose when she reached them. The second guard lunged. Her rifle jammed. She didn't think, just swung it like a club. The crack of bone echoed in the night. Her breath came in ragged bursts as they grabbed the last captive and ran. Bullets snapped past her head as they fled into the dark. No time to look back. No time to think. They didn't stop until they reached the vehicles. The prisoners collapsed in the dust, breathing shallow but alive. Hall leaned against the Humvee, panting. "You're insane," he said finally. She sank to one knee, hands on her thighs. "Maybe." Her chest hurt. But she was smiling now. Just barely. Because for the first time since Outpost 6, someone's family was still whole. And that had to mean something. Why was the base so quiet? She stepped out of the Humvee, boots heavy, uniform caked with dust and blood that wasn't all hers. The sky was turning gray, dawn creeping over the horizon. Normally, the base would be waking up by now. Generators humming louder, soldiers heading to chow, laughter from the ones who had just survived the night. But this morning, no one was laughing. They were staring. At her. At the prisoners, now bandaged and barely conscious, being carried into the infirmary. At the team that stumbled off the convoy like ghosts. The silence was worse than any shout. Inside the command tent, the air was stale and thick. The lieutenant was waiting, arms crossed. "Sit," he said. She didn't. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Do you know what you just did?" Her throat tightened, saved 3 lives. "You also engaged without authorization, crossed into hostile territory, and nearly started an international incident." She said nothing. Because he wasn't wrong. But she wasn't either. "You disobeyed orders," he pressed. "There were no orders," she shot back. The words came sharper than she intended, cutting the air between them. He flinched, then stepped closer. "You think you're the only one who's lost someone." His voice was quiet now. "The only one who's sick of waiting. Every day I sit here and make calls that cost lives, but there are rules for a reason." She clenched her fists. "Rules didn't save my sister." The words slipped out before she could stop them. And there it was, the thing she'd kept buried. The lieutenant stared at her, something softening in his expression. Then he sighed. "Get some rest, we'll talk later." She wanted to argue, wanted to keep fighting. But her body felt too heavy. She left without saluting. In the barracks, Hall was sitting on the edge of his bunk, hands still shaking. He looked up at her. "You good?" he asked. She dropped onto the bed opposite him, helmet clattering to the floor. "No." Hall nodded slowly. Silence stretched between them. "They'd have died if we'd waited," he said finally. She met his eyes. "Yeah." Neither of them said the other part. That someone else might die because of what they'd done tonight. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man she'd hit with the rifle stock, heard the crack of bone, felt the weight of his body when it fell. Her stomach turned. I didn't want to kill him. But she had. Because he was between her and the people she had to save. Was that justice or just survival? The next day, the camp felt different. She felt different. People gave her looks, some nodding with respect, others with quiet judgment. A few whispered when she passed. She pretended not to hear. But the weight of those stares stayed on her back. By midday, the lieutenant called her in again. This time there were others in the tent, the company commander, a few officers she barely knew. Her gut twisted. The commander's face was unreadable. "We've reviewed your actions," he said. She braced herself for the reprimand. But instead, he slid a folder across the table. Inside was an intel packet, maps, photographs, intercepted comms. Her breath caught. "This is where they were taking the captives," the commander said. "We think there's a staging area, larger than we thought." He met her eyes. You brought us this lead. Now we have to hit them before they move again. She stared down at the map, heart thudding. You want me to lead it? She asked slowly. Yes. Her mouth went dry. Because she'd fought so hard to act, to prove she could do something when no one else would. But now that they were asking her to lead officially, she felt the weight of it settle like stone in her chest. That night she walked the perimeter alone. The desert was cold, the stars sharp above her. Her hands were shoved into her pockets, shoulders tense. If I take this mission, I'm responsible for them all. Not just Hall, not just her squad. Everyone. Every choice, every step, every bullet. And if she failed, if one of them didn't make it back, that would be on her too. Her stomach twisted. She thought of Myra again. Of the dog tags she kept hidden at the bottom of her pack. Would her sister want her to take this risk? Or would she want her to stay alive? A shadow moved near the fence line. Hall. He leaned against the wire, arms crossed. You're thinking too loud, he said quietly. She gave a humorless laugh. Didn't know you could hear thoughts. I can when they're stomping around like that. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're scared. She didn't deny it. Good, he said. Her brow furrowed. Means you care about getting it right. The next morning, she stood over the map table again. But this time, she wasn't just tracing the route. She was marking it. Planning it. Command watched silently as she laid out the plan, entry points, fallback positions, evac routes. Her voice stayed calm, even when her hands didn't feel steady. When she finished, the commander nodded once. Approved, wheels up at 2300. Back in the barracks, Hall raised a brow. So we're going. She nodded. He grinned. Good, was worried you chicken out. She gave him a look. You scared? She asked. Always, he said simply. She almost smiled. Then she sat on her bunk and pulled Myra's dog tags from her pack. The metal was cold against her palm. She closed her eyes, whispering so no one else could hear. I won't wait this time. The words felt like a promise. Or maybe a prayer. When the night came, the air was still. Engines rumbled as the convoy lined up outside the gate. She climbed into the lead vehicle, heart steady now. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. This was about doing it right. When the gate opened, the Humvees rolled into the darkness. And she was ready to face whatever waited out there. Why was the night so still? The engines were barely more than a low growl now, rolling across the desert under a sky so dark it felt endless. Inside the Humvee, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint rattle of gear, the creak of seats when someone shifted. Her gloved hands rested on her rifle, fingers tight. The plan was solid, she knew it was. But plans didn't stop bullets. She could feel her heart in her throat, heavy, steady. She told herself it was focus, not fear. Hall glanced at her from the driver's seat. You're doing that thing again, he said quietly. What thing? The staring into space like you're already dead thing. She blinked. I'm thinking. Yeah, thinking about how this could go wrong. She didn't answer. Because he wasn't wrong. They dismounted 2 clicks out. The desert sand was cold under her boots. Night vision painted the world in eerie green as they fanned out, moving low, rifles up. Every crunch of gravel sounded too loud, every breath too sharp. The staging area was ahead, a half-built compound tucked between 2 ridges. Lights glowed faintly behind makeshift walls. She held up a fist. The team froze. Her heart hammered. This is it. Through the scope she counted guards. 4, maybe 5. More could be inside. She signaled the flanking teams forward, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Time stretched thin. A guard stepped into the open, smoking, his silhouette clear against the firelight. Her finger rested on the trigger. One squeeze, and they'd lose the element of surprise. One hesitation, and he might see them first. Choose. She exhaled. Squeezed. The shot cracked softly through the night. The man crumpled without a sound. Then the compound erupted. Shouts. Gunfire. The air tore apart as bullets chewed through sand and stone. She hit the ground, returning fire in short, controlled bursts. Her team moved with precision, just as planned, one covering, one advancing, leapfrogging closer. Hall was shouting into the radio, voice clipped. 2 down, pushing right. She caught a flash of movement on the left, a muzzle flare, and shifted, firing until the light went dark. Sweat trickled down her neck despite the cold. Every nerve was lit. Every sound mattered. They breached the outer wall fast. Inside, the compound was chaos, overturned crates, scattered ammunition, men running for cover. She kicked in the first door, clearing room by room, her rifle steady despite her shaking arms. Hall covered her back, firing at shadows that darted through the narrow halls. Somewhere a grenade went off, the blast wave knocked her forward, ears ringing. She shook it off, teeth gritted. Keep moving. They found the captives in the last room. 2 soldiers, beaten but alive, tied to chairs. Her chest tightened. They looked up at her like she was some kind of ghost. We've got them, Hall shouted. But the victory lasted only seconds. Because the gunfire outside didn't stop. If anything, it was getting closer. She cursed under her breath. They're bringing reinforcements. Hall's face was pale in the green glow. How many? She didn't know. Enough to pin them here if they didn't move now. She slung her rifle, cutting the first captive loose. Grab them, we're leaving. The exfil route was supposed to be clear. But halfway to the vehicles, a burst of fire lit up the ridge ahead. They hit the ground, sand spraying around them. Ambush, someone yelled. Her mind raced. Flank left, push through. Every second they stayed here was a second closer to being surrounded. She could feel her team looking at her, waiting. The same way they had in the briefing room days ago. And again, she was the first to move. Smoke, she barked. Hall popped 2 grenades, white clouds billowed, covering their advance. Go, go. They ran through the haze, dragging the captives with them, bullets cracking overhead. Her lungs burned, legs screaming. But they didn't stop until they reached the Humvees. The engines roared to life. Hall slammed the accelerator, tires spitting sand as they tore into the dark. Tracer fire lit the night behind them, red lines cutting through the smoke. She fired out the back, covering the retreat until the compound was just a glow in the distance. Only then did she let herself breathe. The ride back was quiet. Too quiet. The rescued soldiers slumped in the back, half-conscious. Her team sat in silence, faces hard, adrenaline fatting to exhaustion. Hall glanced at her once, then back at the road. You did it, he said quietly. She didn't answer. Because the words didn't feel like victory. Not yet. When they reached the base, medics swarmed the Humvees. She stayed in the driver's seat a moment longer, hands gripping her rifle so tight her knuckles ached. Her chest felt heavy, too full. Hall crouched beside her door. You okay? She opened her mouth. Then closed it. Because she didn't know. Not yet. Later, after the debrief, after the prisoners were safe in the infirmary, she sat alone on the perimeter wall. The night was quiet again. Too quiet. Her hands were still shaking. Not from fear. From the weight of everything Every shot fired, every choice made, every life carried out of that place alive. Her sister's dog tags were warm in her pocket, as if reminding her, "This is why you do it." She closed her eyes, letting the silence settle over her. Because she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the first battle she'd had to fight, not against the enemy, but against herself. Why did the base feel different now? Morning light spilled over the compound, pale and harsh, turning the world the color of sand. Soldiers moved quietly, their boots thudding against the packed earth, their voices lower than usual. She stood near the infirmary, helmet under her arm, watching medics work on the rescued soldiers. Their faces were battered, swollen, but alive. Alive because she moved first. She should have felt proud. Instead, she just felt heavier. The lieutenant approached, hands clasped behind his back. "You got them home," he said simply. She nodded. "Commands pleased," he added after a moment. She turned to look at him, pleased. He didn't flinch. "They think it was clean, quick, minimal casualties." Her chest tightened. "Minimal," she repeated softly. Because that was the word they used when one of theirs didn't make it back. She didn't want to think about the body they had zipped into a bag last night. A rookie, 19. She hadn't even learned his name until she saw it on the report. In the mess hall, the team sat in silence over untouched food. Hall picked at his tray, his shoulders hunched. No one was laughing, no one trading stories about close calls like they usually did after a mission. She sat with them but didn't eat either. The air smelled of coffee and fried eggs, but her stomach was twisted tight. Finally, Hall broke the silence. "He was right behind me," he said quietly. No one had to ask who he meant. "If I'd just—" "You couldn't have stopped it," she cut in. He looked up, eyes dark. "How do you know?" She hesitated. "Because she didn't." Later, she walked the perimeter again. The desert stretched out around her, empty and endless. Every sound carried in the still air, the buzz of flies near the wire, the distant rattle of a generator. She knelt and picked up a handful of sand, letting it slip through her fingers. How many more names would end up on the reports before this was over? How many before she couldn't carry the weight anymore? That night she couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, the bunk above her creaking when Hall shifted in his sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the rookie's face. Or the man she'd shot. Or Myra. She sat up, pulling the dog tags from her pocket. The metal gleamed faintly in the dark. "Myra," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I'm trying." The words sounded too small in the empty barracks. The next morning brought new orders. Not for her this time. For someone else. But she was called to the briefing anyway. Inside, the company commander stood over the map table, his finger tracing a route. "We have intel suggesting the enemy is relocating further south," he said. "We'll need to intercept before they consolidate." She felt her chest tighten. They weren't done. Not even close. After the briefing, one of the medics caught her outside. A tall woman with tired eyes and hands that always smelled faintly of antiseptic. "You brought those boys back," the medic said. She nodded. "They'll live," the medic continued. But her voice was heavy, as if the words carried more than they seemed. Then she added, softer, "Not everyone would have risked it." The words hit harder than she expected. Because she knew it wasn't just risk. It was choice. And choices had weight. Later, Hall found her near the vehicles. "You going out again?" he asked. "Not yet." He studied her face for a moment. "You're scared of leading another one, aren't you?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said quietly, "I don't know if I can keep asking them to follow me." Hall's mouth twitched, something between a grimace and a smile. They already decided to, he said. That's the problem, she murmured. That night she found herself back at the map table, staring down at the terrain. The lines and symbols blurred after a while. All she could see was the gap where the rookie's name had been erased from the duty roster. She pressed her palms against the table, breathing slowly. If I stop now, more will die. If I keep going, some will die anyway. There was no clean choice. No perfect one. Just the one she could live with. When the next mission came, because it always came, she was the first to sign her name to the roster. Hall just shook his head. Of course you are, he muttered, signing his name under hers. She glanced at him. You don't have to keep following me. Yeah, he said, I do. He grinned then, tired but real. Someone got to keep you from getting yourself killed. For the first time in days, she smiled back. Not because anything was easier now, but because she knew what she had to do. And she wasn't alone. When she lay down that night, she still couldn't sleep. But this time, she didn't just stare at the ceiling. She reached into her pack, pulling Myra's tags into the open, laying them on the pillow beside her. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. You'd hate me if I quit, she whispered. Her voice didn't shake this time. And when she finally closed her eyes, she didn't see the rookie's face. She saw her sister's smile. White heavy checkmark word count, ~1, 530 words. This part acts as a breather after the raid, not in a boring way, but in a way that lets viewers feel the cost of what just happened. It deepens her relationship with Hall, shows her moral struggle, and ends with her deciding to keep moving forward, even though she knows it will cost her. Would you like Part 6 to escalate sharply, a new mission that goes terribly wrong, forcing her into her most difficult choice yet? Or build tension slower, more intelligence gathering, a looming threat, giving viewers dread before the next hit? You said. Zix. ChatGPT said. Excellent. Part 6 is where we tighten the screws again. This section should build intensity and dread, putting her right back into the fire, but with higher stakes and deeper emotional conflict than before. This is where she will be forced to make her hardest decision yet, one that tests the path she chose at the end of Part 5. Here's Part 6, ~1,500 plus words. Why was the radio silent? She pressed the earpiece tighter, scanning the horizon through binoculars. Heat shimmered off the sand, warping the distant ridge. Nothing. The convoy was overdue by 7 minutes. That wasn't late enough to panic, not yet, but long enough for her pulse to quicken. Behind her, Hall crouched beside the vehicle, chewing on a strip of jerky. They'll come, he said. She lowered the binoculars. Or something stopped them. 2 hours earlier, she had briefed the team. Intercept and observe, command had said. Do not engage unless engaged. Simple on paper. But she could still feel the weight of the pen in her hand when she signed the roster. Still hear Hall's mutter, of course you are. The radio crackled suddenly. Her head snapped toward it. A voice ragged, nearly swallowed by static. Under fire, multiple vehicles north of. Then nothing. Hall was already moving toward the driver's side before she could speak. We're not supposed to engage, she said, climbing in beside him. Hall turned the engine over. Sure, he said. Tell that to them. They drove hard, the desert wind screaming past the windows. Dust billowed behind them in a long plume. Every bump in the road sent her heart into her throat. Her hands gripped the dash. When they crested the ridge, she saw them, black smoke curling from a burning vehicle, figures scrambling for cover. Her breath caught. It wasn't their convoy, but it was someone's. Decision time, Hall said. She swallowed hard. The safe move was to report and wait. Backup would come. Eventually. But the firefight was live now. The men below were running out of places to hide. She grabbed the radio. "Command, this is Outrider 2. Visual on enemy contact North Ridge. Friendly status unknown. Requesting permission to engage." Static. More static. No answer. She looked at Hall. They're not going to answer in time. His hands tightened on the wheel. So, she took a deep breath. So we move first. They hit the slope fast, bouncing hard, the suspension groaning under the weight. She grabbed her rifle from the rack, chambered a round. The first shot cracked past them before they even stopped. Hall swung the vehicle sideways, using the door for cover. She dropped to the ground, sighted and fired. One hostile went down. Another ducked behind a rock. Her ears rang with the sound of gunfire, the staccato bursts of rifles. When they reached the wrecked truck, she saw the survivors clearly. 2 local militia, pinned down and bleeding. Young, barely men. One clutched a rifle he wasn't even aiming, just holding like a lifeline. She crouched beside him, pushing his shoulder down. "Stay low," she shouted over the gunfire. His eyes were wide, terrified. He said something in a language she barely understood. But fear sounded the same in every tongue. She glanced at Hall. "We can't hold here," he yelled. "Then we get them out," she said. It was a blur after that. Cover fire. Smoke. Pulling one of the boys by his vest until her arms burned. Hall firing short bursts from the side door. The engine roaring as they accelerated away. Bullets pinging against the frame like hail. Then silence. Only their breathing, ragged and harsh. When they reached the rally point, command was waiting. The major's jaw was tight. "You were ordered not to engage." She stood straight, sand sticking to her sweat-damp face. "They would have died. That was not your mission." Her hands clenched at her sides. "With respect, sir, my mission is to bring people home." Hall shot her a quick look, a half-smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. But the major didn't smile. "Next time," he said, "you wait for orders." She didn't answer. Because she already knew. Next time she wouldn't. That night she sat outside the barracks, knees drawn up, staring at the stars. Her body ached, bruises blooming across her ribs and arms. The rescued boys had been taken to the medic. One of them had gripped her hand before they left, whispering something she didn't understand. But she thought she knew what it meant. "Thank you." Her throat felt tight. She looked down at the dog tags lying against her palm. "Myra," she whispered, "you'd have done the same thing." But as the night deepened, doubt crept in. She had moved first again. And someone, someday, might pay for that. What if she was wrong next time? What if the cost was her team? Footsteps crunched on the gravel. Hall sat down beside her, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "You ever gonna start playing by the book?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not today." He chuckled softly. "Good," he said. "Because I'd hate to get bored out here." She looked at him then, really looked. He was tired. But he was still here. Still choosing to follow. And for now, that was enough. Why was the air so quiet? She crouched in the back of the vehicle, staring at the horizon through the open tailgate. Dawn was creeping over the desert, staining the sky blood orange. The whole team was tense. No one spoke. They had been sent deeper this time, past familiar ground, into an area command called Unstable, which was military speak for hostile territory, high chance of ambush. She gripped her rifle a little tighter. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them out there. When the radio call finally came, it was a whisper. "Movement 1 click ahead. Can't tell if they're ours. Her stomach nodded. Hall glanced at her, face grim. She gave a short nod. Slow advance, keep eyes sharp. The vehicle crawled forward, engine growling low. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when the first shot rang out. Then everything erupted. Gunfire cracked from both sides of the road. The windshield shattered. The driver slumped forward before anyone could grab him. Hall yanked the wheel, forcing the vehicle into a hard skid. "Out!" she shouted. They spilled into the dust, diving for cover as more rounds tore into the vehicle. Her ears rang. Her mouth tasted like metal. She returned fire blindly, just to keep the attackers' heads down long enough for the others to move. But there were too many. Too close. They managed to drag the wounded driver behind a dune, blood soaking his uniform. He wasn't breathing. She pressed her hand to his chest, desperate. No rhythm. No rise and fall. Gone. She forced herself to stand, rage burning behind her ribs. Hall left flank. She swung around the right side, sighted fired, and nearly froze. Because one of the attackers wasn't a fighter at all. He was a boy. Younger than the rookie they had lost. He held his rifle wrong, like a stick, trembling as he pointed it toward her. For a moment, they stared at each other. Her finger tightened on the trigger. She could end it right here. He could too. Then someone shouted, and the boy turned and ran. The fight didn't stop. But something inside her cracked. By the time reinforcements arrived, half the team was down. The firefight had lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Her uniform was stiff with sweat and dirt. Her rifle barrel was too hot to touch. And they had lost two. Two she had looked in the eye at breakfast that morning. Two whose names she had called during roll. Back at the base, she sat outside the barracks, helmet in her lap, staring at the ground until her vision blurred. She heard Hall's boots crunching on the gravel before she saw him sit down next to her. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Hall said quietly, "It wasn't your fault." She didn't answer. He tried again. "You made the call that kept the rest of us breathing." Her throat felt raw. "Then why do I feel like I killed them myself?" Hall didn't try to answer that one. Because he didn't have an answer either. Later that night, she went alone to the edge of the compound. The desert was black under the moonlight. Wind hissed softly through the wire. She took Myra's dog tags from her pocket, gripping them so hard they cut into her palm. "Was I wrong?" she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I keep thinking if I'd been faster, if I'd seen it sooner." The wind swallowed the rest. She sank to her knees, pressing her forehead to the dirt. She wanted to scream. But no sound came. Only silence. The next day, command called her in. The major's face was unreadable. "You're off the roster for the next op," he said. She blinked. "Sir, you're compromised. You need to get your head straight." Something inside her twisted. "No," she said quietly. "You don't get to bench me now." The major's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a punishment. It is. It's survival." She stood there, hands clenched, every muscle in her body screaming to fight him. But she didn't. She turned and walked out. She didn't go back to the barracks. She walked past the wire, past the vehicles, until the base was just a cluster of lights behind her. She sank down in the sand, staring at the horizon. The world felt too big, too empty. She thought about the boy who ran. About the driver who didn't. About the faces of everyone she might still lose. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Myra, I don't know if I can keep doing this." The desert didn't answer. But somewhere deep inside, something steadied. Not peace, not forgiveness, just the faintest thread of resolve. She opened her eyes, and when she stood, she was still shaking. But she was standing. Why was the sky so clear tonight? She stood on the roof of the vehicle bay, boots dusty, helmet dangling from one hand. The stars were endless above her, sharp and cold. The air smelled faintly of oil and heat-baked metal. Below, the base was quiet, too quiet. Tomorrow, a final op would roll out. Not hers, at least not officially. But she had already made her decision. When she walked into the briefing room at dawn, the major didn't look surprised. "Thought I pulled you off this one," he said. "You did," she replied. "Then why are you here?" She placed Myra's dog tags on the table. "Because I can't sit and wait while someone else takes the hit. Not again." For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the major sighed. "You realize if you screw this up." "I won't." Her voice was steady. Because for the first time, she wasn't just reacting. She was choosing. The op was simple on paper: cut off an enemy supply route before it could be fortified. But everyone knew it could turn into a bloodbath. When they rolled out, she sat in the lead vehicle, rifle across her knees. Hall sat across from her, chewing gum like it was keeping him alive. "Last ride?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just the next one." He grinned faintly. "Good answer." The approach was silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They dismounted at the edge of a rocky outcrop, moving low. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound, the crunch of boots, the click of a safety, made her skin prickle. But she kept going, step by step. When the first shot came, she was already in position. She saw the flash, squeezed her trigger, dropped the shooter before he could fire again. "Go," she shouted. The team surged forward, taking the high ground. Hall moved like a machine, precise and fast, laying suppressive fire. The enemy scattered, disorganized, unready for a fight this quick. It was over faster than she expected. But not without cost. One man went down, hit in the leg. She was there before anyone else, pressing a tourniquet tight, whispering steady words until he stopped gasping. This time she wasn't too late. When the smoke cleared, the supply route was theirs. The sun was rising, flooding the desert with gold. For a moment, everything was still. The team stood scattered among the rocks, faces streaked with dirt and sweat, eyes hollow but alive. She looked around, taking in every detail: Hall leaning on his rifle, the wounded man breathing steady, the horizon wide and endless. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself breathe too. Back at base, the major gave her a look that might have been respect or just relief. "No casualties," he said. She nodded. "Minimal," she corrected softly. He didn't argue. That night she walked to the edge of the compound. The desert stretched out in silence, just as it had the night she almost broke. She took Myra's dog tags from her pocket and held them up to the moonlight. Her thumb brushed over the engraved letters. "I kept going," she whispered. She didn't expect an answer. But she felt something settle in her chest, not peace, not joy, but something close to quiet. She clipped the tags back onto her chain, tucking them under her shirt. When she turned back toward the barracks, Hall was standing there, hands in his pockets. "You coming in?" he asked. "In a minute." He nodded, then hesitated. "You did good today." She looked at him for a long moment. "We did good," she corrected. Then she smiled, small, tired but real. And for once he didn't argue. She stayed outside a little longer, listening to the night. The hum of the generator. The far-off sound of laughter from the mess. The whisper of wind across the sand. And for the first time since she arrived here, she wasn't waiting for orders. She wasn't waiting at all. She was ready. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when the next mission came, she would move first again. Not out of defiance, but because now she knew who she was and what she was willing to carry.